Welcome to Love and Life. I'm Dr. Karin Anderson Abril here with my co-host,
Pastor Elliott Anderson.
And Love and Life is your place to hear conversations grounded in psych research, psychotherapy,
and biblical truth
to help us thrive in love and life. I am so excited to have Dave Wayne back on the program, and even more excited to let everyone know that finally we met IRL. I got to meet Dave, his wife Amy, at the Children's Health Defense Conference last weekend in Austin. And she'd been pinging me on, DMing me on Insta, which I'm horribly not consistent with whatsoever. And we have an intern helping us with the posting. And so Amy's telling Dave, I don't know if she's coming. I've reached out. She's just, crickets. And then so Dave texts me like, are you in Austin? And I'm like, heading to the conference right now. And so we got to see each other, hang out, and it was really fantastic to connect and to meet you finally face to face. And I hope this is the first of many times that we are able to conference together with so many other like-minded people, so many awake people. The energy in the room is palpable because we do still, even though we got our guy as HHS secretary, we know he's being destroyed from within, or they're attempting to destroy him from within. And so we still are a fringe community group of medical freedom, health freedom advocates and activists. And to be together was just, it's priceless. I would have gone 100 times over and paid 100 times more than what we paid just to be in that room with these strong leaders, dissidents who have been in the fight way before you and I knew what was going on and have laid the groundwork of how we advocate for ourselves as autonomous, sovereign humans and for our babies, and trying to gently invite others, because unfortunately so much of this discourse has become so polarizing. And so I think Dave, just you and I just riffing kind of, we went to the conference. Here's what really happened. What were some of your impressions about just the speakers, the content, the energy, all the things?
Oh, I would echo off of everything you said. First on the energy, yeah, it was really amazing, not just because they had this incredible lineup of speakers and presenters, but Amy and I really enjoyed just the off-the-cuff conversations that we were having with random people around Austin, especially, the ones in attendance at the conference. We just met the most amazing people, and that was a huge part of the value that came from being down there, were the conversations that we had, not even from the presenters. Yeah.
Just sitting down at a table and knowing that you can speak very candidly and freely about, again, sadly, issues that I don't think should be controversial. I don't think these should be issues that people see, oh, that's a right-wing position, especially because you and I have talked extensively. That used to be a left-wing position. Just full disclosure, I don't know. Like if you're a millennial and younger, maybe you don't know that, and you're probably a millennial technically, but that the position that is now considered right-wing nut job, health freedom, crazy person, which yes, guilty as charged, proud of it, will never ever step away from that term. Bring it. I don't care what you call me. Yeah, I believe in health and medical freedom. I believe that Big Pharma is a known criminal organization, that we are essentially living in a drug cartel run by Big Pharma. Yeah, go ahead. Is that a smear? Is that a slur? Because I'm here for it and I don't care. And to just know that we could have these conversations very candidly and openly with some random person who sits at your table. They may not be where we are entirely. There are still people there who are probably more pro-pharma or see a place for pharma in certain contexts and situations that I have pretty much left the grid entirely. But I drove, who was I talking to? Some person was talking to me about a statin, and I'm like, but it's fine. No one's going, well, you're an idiot. Everyone's just like, okay, all right, well, let's talk it out. Like, what do you think are the benefits of this particular drug that you still believe has benefits, as opposed to these other drugs that you, like me now, are not into? But you can have those conversations, and that's a very calm and rational. And I think what we would have thought is the way that most people had discourse around many issues, not even like 10 years ago, although now everything, many, and not just pharma, but so many of these concerns seem so heightened that people just can't, they get dysregulated like that. And that was not the case here at the conference.
Yeah, it's really interesting, people getting dysregulated like that, because, of course, the stereotype is that these are a bunch of anti-vaxxers, but the truth is
Yes.
that most of them 10 years ago were taking every vaccine ever offered to them. Most
Right.
of the people in attendance there are ex-vaxxers, and they have changed their mind because of things that they have experienced firsthand or
Yeah.
learned from working with, patients and doctors and nurses. And what's interesting is there was also a change on the other side. Like, we kind of flip-flopped, where it used to be the progressive liberal position to distrust big pharma.
Right.
And what I don't understand is what happened to them to make them switch teams. Like, we switched teams because we had our eyes opened. A lot of people there had a child with a vaccine injury.
Yes.
These were not born anti-vaxxers. These are
Right.
ex-vaxxers. But what happened to all the people who believe so strongly in vaccines that 10 years ago would have been really skeptical and cynical about big pharma? Like, what happened to them that they switched teams to the other side? We know what happened to the ex-vaxxers, but
Right.
I don't get it. I don't get it. But I am adding booger eating retard to my list of credentials when I introduce myself. And I introduce myself in the ways that my critics speak about me, just because I want to get people out of the habit of these appeals to authority. Where like, oh, this person has all these letters behind their name, so they must be right about everything. Like, I met so many people at the conference who don't have an enormous list of letters after their name, and yet they are vastly more informed than so many of the doctors in our communities and in our hospitals.
Well, yeah, and I know I've seen the list of questions that medical freedom advocates and children's health defense in particular, because their primary focus is children, which of course is our future. And children, all of us are involved in children's lives to some degree. And they have the list of questions that you can ask a pediatrician, and parents do this. And it can be like 20 questions that are very relevant. Like, what are the ingredients in these vaccines that you're about to shoot my child up with 4 in one visit or 5 in one visit? And I'm not talking and not a child, even an infant 3 months old. You ask them, they will not tell you. They will not know. They'd have to pull out the insert themselves. And you ask them questions that, again, people who have other ideology don't understand that these cell lines for these vaccines were developed using aborted fetuses. Now, that's not everyone's concern, but it is someone like me who's pro-life. And you have people who are very pro-life who don't know that. So we talk about informed consent. That used to be a thing everyone valued. I mean, over COVID, of course, that got tossed out the window, and you were a raging lunatic to ask for informed consent. How dare you not trust the experts? Who do you think you are? Yeah, to your point, where are your letters after your name? So informed consent is never happening. But other questions like, can I sue if my child has an allergic reaction to this, or has anaphylactic shock, or if my child acquires some sort of peanut allergy, egg allergy, ADHD, autism, and I believe that there's an association. Can I sue? Pediatricians they wouldn't even know. I don't know if they know. I don't know if they're told not to tell. But so these very basic questions, people don't know that they should ask them. And to your point, the professionals involved, I think very many times, do not know themselves, do not care to know. And of course, we have to remember that pediatricians in particular are incentivized not to know and to just jab, because a certain percentage of their patients in their practice, they will be compensated by the insurance companies. So that's why kids get kicked out of a practice if the parent says, I'm not vaccinating. Many practices will say, well, then you're not going to be at our practice. And I'm sure their rationale, they would say, because your child with their unvaxxed breath is going to get the rest of my patients sick. I'm sure that's what they would say. We know that there are other motives at work.
Yeah, exactly, for sure. An example that comes to mind for me is a doctor recently who had an argument against somebody's religious exemption, and the person's protest to the vaccine was that this is not natural and my body is a temple and I don't want to put something unnatural and disrupt my God-given immune system. And the doctor one of the points the doctor made was about mRNA, about how mRNA is natural and about how it degrades in the body after, it's got like a 10-hour half-life and blah, blah, blah. And It's like, okay, the level of ignorance of this person doesn't even know that this is synthetic mRNA, which replaced uridine with N1-methyl pseudouridine, an accomplishment so profound it won the Nobel Prize. It won the Nobel Prize for being unnatural. And this doctor is there arguing like, oh no, mRNA, the mRNA in the vaccines is, this totally natural compound. You can't argue that this is unnatural. It degrades in 10 hours. And now we know, we have studies like the one out of Yale where for some people, they are cranking out spike protein for years after taking the vaccine. They did no studies on how long does it actually take for the N1-methyl pseudouridine to degrade in people. So yeah, it's the ignorance is wild, but they just cling to it so rabidly. They don't like their authority challenged. They don't want those bonus checks from big pharma companies to stop coming to their practices.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, again, and to your question earlier about how people who used to be, like how everything flipped and how we know how we got to arrive at our position. And again, I've told you a million times and our audience that it was my left-wing liberal professor, jazz musician father who indoctrinated into Elliott and me and our other brother to be skeptical of pharma, to be very wary because pharma, and to be wary of your doctor. Get a second, third, 10th opinion because the pharmaceutical corporation has completely captured the medical industry. He would always say, they're in bed together. And so when you're coming at it from that perspective, you just don't give this blind, oh, the authority figure has spoken and so I must comply. Like, who are you? And what's your agenda? Whether they mean to or not. But it does make you skeptical, but I'll say it this way. It makes you savvy. It makes you question, which is what we were taught to do. Although now blind allegiance and fealty to the party, which I think that's also because it's become politicized. And then people go into their, well, I'm a good left winger. So I'm going to wear my mask in 2025 and I'm going to jab my kid with 7,000 boosters. And if they have 90 shots from pregnancy to 18 years old, give me 95 because I'm a better liberal than you. It's twisted. And then it makes me think, is that part of the plan? Get the people to align on the ideological underpinnings of everything and then make things have ideology that they shouldn't, but people will go then because I want to show. Like, so Biden, Harris and who else? Cuomo, all these people, when Operation Warp Speed was ratcheting up, I wouldn't take a Trump vaccine. Minute Biden's in office, Pfizer brings the vaccine to market. I'm taking it ASAP because I'm a good Democrat. People, wake up. That is manipulation at the highest level. It's not that they're forcing you to poison yourself. It's that you are lining up and poisoning yourself because you think you're just doing the noble thing. This is so maniacal. It's hard to not see the entire thing as a psyop. We can go down that road another day or today. I don't care. Whatever. But also back to the booger comment. Someone called you a booger eating retard.
That was one of the comments leveraged against the attendees of the conference that I heard. So, but that's where we're at, and we've talked about before how people who look at us like that, they just steal the intellectual and moral high ground away from us while viciously maintaining their own ignorance about the topics that we're also well informed and passionate about. They're only able to do that because they refuse to challenge any of these deeply held beliefs, like so many of the attendees of the conference have. So many people have been through so much. The moms who were there, or just having your entire worldview shattered because you used to have trust in these systems and in these authorities and in doctors and the people in the white coats. And then you go through something with your own child or in your own medical practice. And boy, the world gets pretty uncomfortable.
Well, I remember, so I'm teaching child development. I think we talked about that this fall. And you can't be me and teach child development without devoting a good amount of time, because I'm thinking of trying to save these future babies that I look at my students and they're young in their early 20s and they're going to be having children in the next 10 years. And in fact, one of my students is pregnant right now. And I have to, and I don't want to approach the class as like, it's my chance to get in people's faces about what I believe, but I'm a developmental psychologist and I know some things that, again, most people do not have informed consent about. So I played Vaxxed, the documentary, because it's a night class. So 3 hours, you're going to definitely want to intersperse some media. And I showed that. And I remember Polly Tommy, who we got to see many times throughout the weekend. She was moderating a lot of the sessions. And she's a woman who has a vaccine injured child. And the child's in his 20s now, I believe. I mean, he's older now. And she spoke to it. She said, I'm like many, many people in this room. I have a marriage where I very rarely get to spend time just with my husband and me. And their kids are grown now, but one isn't because he was vaccine injured. And I believe they showed him in the documentary. That was 2016. So he's probably close to 30 now. And he will have meltdowns like a 2-year-old. He may not be in diapers. This is the kind of reality that we're seeing. She knows it was after the MMR. The child, we have video of the child. They show in the documentary of him being perfectly normal, eye contact, developing, acquiring language, and then boom, vaccine injury, lights out, stimming, hand flapping, no eye contact, loses all language, banging head against the wall, raging, having diarrhea. This goes to the GI, which we'll talk about in a minute. And I'll never forget it. She's in the documentary and she's like, I've lost my son. He's gone. I'm only here trying to do everything within my power to protect other families from having to go through what we are going through and will continue to go through for the rest of our lives. Like, she's got no skin in the game. She gets all the slurs, gets called crazy, anti-vax. She could just be like, screw all of you. My child was injured and I just have to devote my life to my child because we are in a living hell that is never ending. No, she gets out there time after time because for what? For other people. And that's what's so frustrating is that when we're painted as freaks, it's like we are literally screaming to try to protect the babies and in the same, and we know that's our energy. We know that's our passion. That's where we're coming from. But at the same time, people look at us and go, why would you do that? Why? It's like, because we like being called booger eating retards. Yeah, that's why we're doing it. How about you, Dave? You're out here just like trying to like have people call you names because it's fun. It's a good time.
Right. It's a good time. That brings to mind Andrew Wakefield, who I would love to talk to you about. So I see you've got your Andrew Wakefield shirt on.
And I want to show this to the group. Here we are. Wakefield was
right. So Andrew Wakefield was one of the guests at this conference. And for people who don't remember, he is the doctor who published a study in the late 90s that speculated that more research needs to be done looking at vaccines and gut health, which was his specialty as a doctor, and a possible link to autism. He did not publish a study that says vaccines cause autism. He called for more research because of evidence that he was seeing in his practice, in his specialty. And of course, he became villain number one of Big Pharma and was accused of all sorts of horrible, horrible things. He ended up, the paper got retracted. If you ask the general lay person, they will believe that he committed fraud and was convicted of fraud. Of course, none of that was true. It was all Glaxo and Merck and people paid by Glaxo and Merck who went after him. He suffered incredibly over the last almost 3 decades at this point. He lost his medical license. He was persona non grata. I mean, he really endured a lot. And seeing him at this conference, and people were selling T-shirts and things like that said Wakefield was right. And there was certainly a lot of love and respect for him there from the crowd for being so ahead of the curve on all this. And I had a chance to chat with him, and I believe it was his wife there with him. And I asked him whether or not he felt vindicated and said, I hope, your interactions with this crowd here and having people give you a standing applause, I hope you feel vindicated. And he just, over the entire course of the conference had this sense of profound sadness around him. He just really still seemed like he had this incredible weight on his shoulders. And I've been thinking about that since we saw him and traveling back. And I think it comes back to one of the things he said about the damage that's been done. And he's really worried, like so many people are, about people's fertility and where our entire Western civilization is going because of the damage that's been done. We are clearly on the road towards population collapse. All these Western countries, the only reason their population is going up is because of importing people from third world countries. Like all of Western society right now is already in the midst of a population collapse. And I think that's still weighing really heavily on him. But what were your thoughts on Dr. Wakefield?
Yeah, no, thank you for presenting that, because it's if you don't see the timeline, if you don't understand, Elliott and I our finger was on the pulse in the 90s because our nephew was diagnosed with autism right before his second birthday so he was born in 97. So this was right around this time where we're seeing this huge uptick. And why are we seeing this huge uptick? It's because in 1986, the vaccine, whatever you would know the exact name of it, but what is it called? The Vaccine Injury Act
Injury Compensation Act, something. Yeah.
Right. So but what that did was made the government compensate people to the tune of like a piddly amount of money, and let the vaccine manufacturers, including Merck and Pfizer and whoever else is in the game, to be off scot-free. You cannot sue. So getting back to that question we talked about earlier. But yeah, Wakefield, my sense, and I didn't talk to him personally, although he did say something to me when I was getting a cookie at lunch. He's like, "Are you taking the last chocolate chip cookie?" And I was like, "No, but I'm about to buy your shirt." Because I was headed over, but there's a long line to buy at his merch table. And so I didn't, but I'm not a stargazer at all. Like, I do not care about Hollywood stars. I do not care about pop stars, but you got my doc stars. I am like fangirling so hard. I was like, Andy Wakefield just talked to me. Dr. Wakefield just talked to me. So cool. But yeah, one thing that struck me, again, I want to get back to the timeline you shared, how he got into this space. He didn't want in either. Bobby didn't want in either. No one wanted this space. No one,
wanted to be part of this fight.
No. It was these moms that came to him and they're talking about their autistic child. And he's like, "I'm a GI doc. I got nothing for you." And they're like, "No," including the cognitive decline and the profound damage. There's also a GI aspect because of sorry to be graphic, but diarrhea, like massive explosive, like something's happening in their GI tract too. That's what brought him into this field. He didn't want in this space. But once you see what's happening, people of integrity cannot unsee it. And they have to stand firm in the midst of, I know he mentioned back in the 90s, he was one of like 4 or 5 people on the planet willing to challenge the establishment on this. And so for him, I think he probably does feel vindicated when he comes to a room full of 1,000 people who get it. But it's taken a toll on him. I'm sure personally, I'm sure professionally, we know for a fact. And he's concerned about the future generation of how many years of poisoning babies. And yes, it's going to impact fertility. Yes, it's going to impact all the allergies we have, all the autoimmune stuff. But I was so impressed by him still, because you remember there was something they were talking about, how maybe it was the study that had been debunked by all the pharma funded debunkers. And then that had been debunked also. And he said, and he looked and he spoke to the media, because there was media there, and like New York Times and Washington Post. I know you talked to some of them, so I want the listeners to hear about your interactions with the media. And he looked at them and just pointed his finger like, "Are you going to now report on this? Are you?" Trying to be like, have an ounce of ethics in your journalistic body, please. What? It's the capture is so immense. It's mind-blowing. It's staggering. But talk about the media if you would.
Yeah, his call out of the media, I think, was really fantastic. It makes me think about again, what he went through in the late 90s, early 2000s, all the slings and arrows he endured. And what vaccine was he threatening? The MMR vaccine is the one that was kind of called out in his research. And who's the big manufacturer of the MMR vaccine? It's Merck. So Merck, they were spearheading these smears against Dr. Wakefield, and they were instrumental in all the awful things that happened to him. At the exact same time, executives at Merck were lying about the cardiac side effects of Vioxx.
Yep.
You know Dr. Wakefield's name. Everyone knows Dr. Wakefield's name. Does anyone know the names of the executives at Merck who sat in meetings and planned on how to hide the cardiac side effects of Vioxx? That killed 60,000 people. And nobody knows their names. None of them are in prison. None of them lost their license. Their articles weren't retracted. You look at that juxtaposition there, what happened to Dr. Wakefield and what happened to doctors who we know intentionally killed tens of thousands of people, ruined hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives from other people who survived their heart attack, survived their stroke, the families left behind from the dead. Nobody knows the names of those doctors, and they all have thriving careers. They all got promotions, and that's where we're at. That's, you know, how many people at the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal put their names on blast versus somebody like Dr. Wakefield. So yeah, they get to sit back and call us all booger eating retards while they protect power instead of speaking truth to power. And every now and then I see some cracks where stories break through in the mainstream media, and you can see that there are maybe some journalists out there who are starting to question things. There are reporters at both the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times who are starting to take a closer look at the profound sexual side effects of antidepressants. And these stories are starting to break through into the mainstream. So that's a sacred cow that they're willing to challenge at least a little bit now. So I don't know. I don't know.
We'll be here for him. We'll cheer them on. But my beloved state of residence right now, Indiana, Eli Lilly will fight them. You go to Wawasee, just an aside here, which is where my husband's family, where they've had lake houses over the years. It's a big lake in Indiana. And you get around to this one part of the lake and you see a mansion and then another mansion. And there's about 5 of them. And this is the Lilly compound. We're there a couple summers ago for a family reunion. And we get there and I'm like looking and I'm seething. And I say, and of course, you know, Dan's family, not of course, but some people know, some don't. Dan's family is very Democrat, which again, shouldn't mean anything in this conversation whatsoever, but it does. So I'm sitting there and I can't help myself because, I mean, you know me, Dave. So I'm sitting there, I'm like, yep, it's all that Prozac money. And one of his nephews starts cracking up because he got it. But everyone else is like, huh, what? But Lilly, they have a foundation. They provide all this educational resources. Oh, and I'm thinking, yeah, I'm sure they fund what? The med schools? Sure they do. Anyway, also back to Wakefield though, because before we move on to any other doctors or any other discussions or sessions we want to cover, Wakefield, if at the jump in the 90s, he wasn't an anti-vaxxer by any stretch. He looked at the data and he saw that the later a child got the MMR, the less likely they were to have adverse events of any kind and autism in particular. And so instead of at 18 months, let's after 4, and he was looking at that kind of data set. He also looked at splitting it up. Maybe the body of an infant doesn't do well with 3 jabs in 1 vial. How about MMR becomes measles shot, mumps shot, rubella? Those were his recommendations. He wasn't even trying to get people not to take the jabs. Now, I think now he probably would. And even Polly Tommy, do you remember that panel? She's like, I, by the way, was never for the MMR ever because that's the one that killed her child, essentially. I shouldn't say killed, he's alive, but she lost her boy because of that. But Wakefield at the time in the 90s, he wasn't even advocating for no jabs. So it's so interesting that he was attacked ruthlessly. And he was just saying, hey, it makes sense to give the body a little time before inundating the child, the infant, with all these chemicals. That's what he was initially called for.
Yeah.
But they couldn't even handle that.
They couldn't handle that. And look at the changes that they have made since then, because
Yes.
the manufacturers know that he is right. They know that giving 3 at the same time is worse than giving fewer than that. They also know that the earlier they're given, the more damage is possible. And what changes have they made since they destroyed Wakefield's career? They have added a 4th dose to the MMR vaccine. They've created MMRV, which now has the varicella virus. So instead of trimming it down, they've added to it. And we also now see Hep B given at the moment of birth.
Yeah.
So the same people who knew Wakefield was right are just, it's pedal to the metal in terms of like, how is it not just like intentional at this point? It's what's that saying in the military is like, once is an accident, twice is, what is it? Coincidence, and 3 times is an act of war. It's like at this point, we're not at the 3rd time with big pharma. It's one thing after another like this. This feels like a war, and it makes you start to go down some of those more like conspiratorial pathways where people talk about depopulation agendas and stuff like that, because like, I don't know what else, like corporate greed by itself is kind of inadequate to explain some of these things. And like, I don't want to become conspiratorial or even think that would be possible in this world, but all these things happening together, the mRNA vaccines, the childhood schedule, antidepressants, like what would you do differently? Wide open borders. I really don't know what you would do differently if that wasn't your agenda.
Mm-hmm. What do they call that? 5th generation warfare?
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the term, but the idea that the war is happening, but you don't know you're in a war. And
right.
so
It's an information warfare. It's all these
like
more
that.
subtle things like, these biological agents that just change people profoundly and erode their health and erode their fertility. And
the best, the PSYOP to frame, and I believe this term was originated by the CIA after the JFK assassination, conspiracy theory, which then that pejorative term, anyone who asks questions, anyone who challenges establishment or challenges authority or says, hey, at what point do we finally say pharma is in the business of killing? Like they don't care. Like they create drugs that make horrible side effects and then they have another drug for that. And yeah, what is it? Acceptable losses? Is that what they do with the 60,000 Vioxx dead? Like,
oh yeah, they start setting aside money for products that they know are going to have class action lawsuits later. They just start setting aside,
and they set
the
aside
money they know they'll. Yeah.
And it's pennies on the dollars that they're making. The profits are so that if you make $100,000 and you have to shell out 50, still a win, a win. Sorry, but everyone's dead. Sorry, people lost husbands, wives, children, family members, grandpas. So what? I got my second lake house. So what? I got my ski chalet. So what? Like they don't care.
No, they don't care.
No. And then, but people still have this trust. I'm like, actually.
Right. They not only have their trust in the products of these completely psychopathic companies, but they still have trust in the government who's supposed to protect them from these completely psychopathic companies. And you brought up the term conspiracy theory, and look at all the conspiracy theories that have turned into conspiracy facts and all the incredibly underhanded things that our government has done over the years. One of them that comes to mind that I think is relevant to this conversation is Operation Paperclip. So I've got my copy of the Nuremberg Code here. This was really fun to have at the conference because I had like all these incredible doctors and other people who've been in the fight for so long. I just had them sign my copy of the Nuremberg Code. But what happened at Nuremberg? We hung something like a dozen Nazis who committed war crimes and other atrocities. And what was Operation Paperclip? Operation Paperclip, and this is all out in the public domain now, so feel free to look it up yourself. But the US government saw value in all these Nazi scientists, especially rocket scientists and some of their other people like that who the US government thought that there was a lot of value in the knowledge that they had in terms of gearing up for the Cold War and making our military as powerful as it could possibly be. They brought something like 1,200 Nazis over to the US in order to put them to work in research for the military industrial complex. So we hung 12 people and we brought 1,200 over to this country. Part of the incredible atrocities that we see being committed by companies like Merck and Glaxo, it's only happening because our government is complicit with it, and our judicial and legislative systems are complete failures in doing their job to protect us from psychopaths like the people at Merck and the people at Glaxo.
And because of our system that allows politicians to take enormous sums of money for their campaigns from pharma. And I've heard people saying, well, they should wear patches of who's sponsoring them the way the NASCAR guys do. And I agree, because that's why everyone was mum. Yeah. That's why like Ron John was one of the only ones who spoke up during COVID. Because, and one of my friends, and she's on the left, and she's like, Bernie and AOC are so anti-pharma. I'm like, where were they the last 5 years? I didn't hear a peep, not a peep. Like, and that's the thing. People, like, once you take a stance like we have, they think we're right. I'm not a Republican. If anything, I'm a libertarian. That's what I've been, I think, my entire life. I voted on both sides because that's the only, well, actually, I did vote for Gary Johnson in 2016 because I wanted a third party representation. I still stand by that. I think it'd be great. But here's the point. If we had more people on the left actually living by the values they espouse to have, we would have more common ground. It wouldn't be so divided. But they get there, and my friend, she's like, she's an outsider. I'm like, is she though? She was like the first to endorse Biden this last election. Like, she may have been an outsider at one time, although I think she was basically handpicked as an actress for this progressive Democrat group, but whatever. But just as an example, even Bernie, to watch Bernie, like, do you support this onesie? Hilarious. Like, I'm like looking at the guy, supposedly the biggest radical anti-establishment guy, being like, pharma and the vaccines are important. Robert Kennedy, your company has onesies that say unvaxxed and unafraid. This is ludicrous. Bernie, look in the mirror. Who are you? You are the most establishment joke. I don't even know who you think you are anymore. And that's getting back to the conference. These people that we look to as our heroes in our field, in our well, it is our field. They are the ones who stand up on their principles, despite the vicissitudes and the changing ground beneath them. They stand firm on their principles, despite the slings and arrows, as you said, and they don't care. It's like, it's not about party. It's not about who I'm supposed to be, which team I'm on. It's like, this is a value on which I stand. If that makes me right wing now and left wing tomorrow, I don't care. It's the value. It's the principle. And that's why I love being in their presence. I'm always like, there goes my hero. I mean, like Ron John, it was so disappointing not to be able to see him in person because of the shutdown. I guess he and Rand Paul couldn't come, but we got to see them in a live stream anyway. But who else was, or what else? Take it from there.
Oh, yeah, I was really looking forward to seeing Ron Johnson and Rand Paul as well. It was disappointing. I did not have any significant travel delays, so that was a relief despite the ongoing government shutdown. So let's see, what else?
Let's talk about the spellers. That was, okay. I know both of us were moved by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Speller's presentation, I saw it on the itinerary and didn't really know what
Yeah.
to expect. It was three young adults, two men and a woman, and they were profoundly autistic. They were nonverbal. So they had been, like so many other nonverbal autistic children, labeled as extremely low functioning. They're put in the special ed class and they're just kind of written off, you know? There's a program, an educational program for both providers and for children like that called Spellers. There's a documentary on YouTube. I have not watched it yet. It's first on our watch list as soon as we get any free time. That really lays it all out. We more got to see it in action while we were there at the conference, but seeing this process in action was truly amazing. They would have a board or a piece of paper with letters on it and ask questions of these three nonverbal autistic young adults. And it would take them a while to both think through and spell out their responses, but they were actually capable of incredible communication.
Yeah.
They were actually quite intelligent, witty,
Yeah.
making puns, cracking jokes,
Yes.
and it was explained to us that part of being nonverbal when you're autistic is just the mechanistic action of speaking
Right.
is something that is damaged. It's
Right.
part of the injury that happens that comes with autism, and people are finding ways around it and unlocking methods of communication that are just incredible. And it was both inspiring and incredibly saddening because they
Yeah.
said that there are something like a couple million
Yeah.
nonverbal autists out there in the US. And to think of them being so intelligent, but trapped in their own head and
Yeah.
unable to convey these deep thoughts that they're having to the world is so sad and depressing. And
Yeah.
yeah, what were your thoughts on that presentation?
Yeah, the same. It was very moving. It's disorienting because, to your point, we see someone who appears to have some sort of cognitive disability, and we immediately assume that's a special ed situation. Whatever I'm seeing here on the face is probably the same as what's going on in the mind and in the brain, because they couldn't, I think it was a fine motor related issue that they can't produce. The mouth won't, the muscles won't work. Like you said, they can't produce language. But here's so much is going on. I remember the one young lady, when the moderator asked the question, how did it feel when you were able to start spelling? And she said she spelled, and then her mom was reading her, what she had written. And she said, it felt like I was released from prison. I mean, can you imagine? And I think about some of these that maybe haven't been identified as potentially being able to be spellers, some of those rages and these tantrums that they would throw. I would too. If I was like, I have something to say and
Yeah.
I can't say it, but I know it's in here. And to recognize that they had the comprehension was all there. And to your point, I was struck. I thought this will be interesting, but I it's like, they're hilarious. They're like cracking jokes and cracking up a room full of 1,000 people. They're so, it was just, that's a human in there. And the tragedy is that we don't perceive them as the same as like you and me, which is, it's not like, we can't feel bad about it because that's just human nature. We see something that's off and we just make assumptions. But it was very, I think, good for us to go, okay, well, let me check myself. I, in the future, can perhaps encounter someone like this and see them with more humanity than maybe sadly I haven't in the past.
Yeah, absolutely. And seeing somebody's humanity, you wouldn't think that would be such a big ask these days. But
Yeah.
I'm going to bring it back to what happened with Charlie Kirk and the stakes that are at play in this fight we're in. We've learned that the people who would gladly fire us for being unvaccinated will also gladly cheer when somebody who is such an amazing human being as Charlie Kirk gets assassinated. And That's what's at stake here. That's where we're at, and I'm glad we have so many more people waking up and fighting the good fight. But it was very energizing. It was very invigorating. It both gives me a lot of hope, but it's also hard to not see dark days ahead too, Karen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. What do you think?
Yeah, because I just was listening to something. I guess it's been 2 months since Charlie was murdered, and it would have wrapped up his fall campus tour. That I think it was one of the first events that he was assassinated, and he wanted to wrap it up at Berkeley, which again, for anyone who's Gen X and maybe older millennials knows that Berkeley has been, certainly boomers know, Berkeley has been known as the campus for free speech in the 60s, the boomers, when they were young, they were marching and advocating and protesting and free speech, free speech. And here Charlie's tour did go to the event. Without Charlie, they continued to move on, Turning Point USA. And I guess there were so many protesters, and they were like, F you. Oh no, F your homie. Basically mocking and making fun of the assassination of someone who was about free speech, because they have been caught up in believing that hate speech is harmful rhetoric. Anything that they don't like is all of a sudden violence to them. And so there they are, and there's people like doing this, like shooting, like making pantomiming that they're shooting themselves in the neck, and again cussing and signs, and there was someone who had a bunch of freedom t-shirts that looked like the one that Charlie was wearing when he died, with blood on them. I mean, this is, like, to your point, humanity, this is vile. And I'm not saying people on the other side can't be vicious too, but we're seeing this demonstrated out in the open in ways that I've never seen in my life. And that's troubling, because I look at all of our panel and our, like I said, our doc stars, and many of these people have to be thinking, when's it going to come for me? When? Because we speak truth and we're in jeopardy. We ask for honest debate, the way that the Western civilization was built upon the Enlightenment, where you have an idea and you hone your idea and you get your points together so that you can argue. And then someone else comes and you go, okay, I see your point, but here's my rebuttal. This is out the window now, because your facts make me feel uncomfortable. So, I can't handle it. You're mean. And in fact, then it goes from you're mean to you're hateful and you should die. And if you die, I will dance on your grave and feel good about it. That's what we're seeing, because the lack of empathy, I experienced it myself, and I talked about it on the podcast. People could not, if they hated Charlie Kirk, they could not say, Karen, but you're one of my best friends. And I know you're grieving. I feel sorry for you. And I'm just going to say it. If someone on the other side of many of the things that like if Fauci was murdered in cold blood, I would not be happy. I want him in jail, but I don't want him dead. I just don't, that's not how I was raised to believe. As a Christian, I cannot wish death upon someone. They are fine wishing death upon us. They just are.
Yeah, they just are. You know, all these pharma executives, people like Anthony Fauci and Ralph Barrick, I would love to see them prosecuted to the full extent of the law, including the death penalty for crimes against humanity. But that would come after a fair and transparent trial. It's different. Yeah, we're different. And
we are.
You know, it's not really a right versus left issue, though. I think it's kind of has that general appearance, but at the same time, you look at Washington and it's not, you know, a bunch of evil Democrats versus a bunch of good Republicans. Like the Republican establishment and the Washington establishment in general is just so profoundly corrupt and overtaken by these forces at this point that they love us pretending that this is a right versus left issue, because it distracts us from actually draining the swamp and cleaning house of these absolute psychopaths that are on both teams at this point.
Yeah. I mean, that's, again, how many people, to me, the litmus test will always be COVID. Who spoke up?
Yeah.
Very few, very, very few, very few.
It was very few, but there was also just profound censorship. So people tried to speak up, and they had their accounts banned. They were shadow banned. That was certainly something we experienced here in my hometown. But then, that's very disheartening, and it gives this, kind of illusion of consensus. Yeah, you're right, though. Very, very few people did overall seem to even try.
But even to the politicians, like when you were talking about left versus right, Republican versus Democrat, Ron John was the shining star. And that's why we gave money to your senator, because we were, he was the one who brought Pierre Corey in 2020, I want to say, the fall of 2020.
Yeah, fall of 2020, talking about corticosteroids. Yeah.
Yep. He was the one who was, and I think his first panel was called A Second Opinion or something like that. He's like, what are we actually doing right now?
Yeah.
And he was one of the only ones, but he can't be bought because he's a successful businessman.
Because he doesn't need the Pfizer bucks. Yeah.
That's right. So, all right, as we wind down, any parting thoughts about the conference? Any of the speakers? I mean, we have kind of alluded to, is some of this planned? And Dr. Weinstein, Brett Weinstein, who I know is a personal fave of both you and me, and he was one of the closing sessions, and he kind of walked through it about pharma's playbook. And he's another one who, right in 2020, his first talk, he talked about that. His wife and he had written this book, and one of the main contributions from the medical industry to humanity, they at that time believed vaccines, and they have come in the span of 5 years to now distrust. I pretty much think he's anti-vax at this point, but it's because he's looked, and so he was saying something a little bit like, it's kind of humbling but to my mind, those are my favorite people. The people who were over here and go, wait, but I have to ask a question. A question was posed to me. I do some digging. Then I go, oh, because again, another value that you and I were raised with is to be open-minded. What does it mean to be open-minded? It means that if you hear new information that causes you to change your position, you do so.
You do so, and you acknowledge hey, I got this wrong, and you try and unpack why and how you got here, and you have that humility, and it's unbelievable that those traits aren't more celebrated and draw more people in. It's like, why would you ever choose Team Pfizer over that? It's over that insanity.
Over team evolutionary biologist. I'm a Christian. On the surface, we should have very little in common. But no, he and Heather were some of in those dark days of COVID. I remember one Christmas, it was 2 a.m. It's the day, Christmas Eve or the 23rd or whatever. And I'm rapping, trying to and I'm like, oh, I got to listen to someone who's aware of what's going on. We felt so alone and alienated because again, the censorship. So people who were speaking were being shadow banned or banned. And so they were some of the rocks that really got me through. And I love the people who are willing to do what you just said. I got it wrong. I know more now. And I'm going to now stand on this new principle because I'm informed. And that's why, again, the being around those pillars of this movement, it was so incredible. And like you said, to rub shoulders with those of us in the army. But so anything else? Any other session that?
Brett was the same for us, and Amy and I got a chance to briefly meet him while he was there, and I got to tell him that he was a light in the darkness when the world didn't really make sense, and then we were fired nurses. So thanks a lot, Brett. and he also is one of the signatures on my Nuremberg code here. So it was amazing. It was energizing. And I feel like, for all the problems that we've called out that are so much bigger than any one person, we do have momentum, and we do have this call to action to, you can affect change at the local level. And sometimes the people in this movement, it's very libertarian. It's very much like herding cats. And that's something where we often fall short, is things like, off-season elections and stuff like that. We are just not as organized at, collecting mail-in ballots and doing all the things. And
we don't have a George Soros. Maybe that's what we need.
We don't have a George Soros. Yeah. And we also have a lot of saboteurs in the Trump administration who are making this very much an uphill battle. So but more people every year wake up. I feel like people. I don't know. I was going to say, I don't feel like people switch sides in the other direction. People, but then again, we talked about in the beginning how all these liberals 10 years ago were so skeptical of big pharma, and here we are now. So I might have to think on that for a bit, and maybe that'll be a topic for a future show.
Yeah. And another thing we should probably try to get someone to discuss with us would be the EMF stuff, because that was something that I know, but when I go to CHD's website, I don't tend to gravitate to that stuff. But
I'm
airplane mode.
Airplane mode. There's a lot of red flags there, and I don't know much about it, but maybe it's something we need to dive into.
Yeah. I mean, it's neither of our area of expertise, but I think we need to be a little bit more informed. So, and I did make a bunch of contacts with some other people I want to have on the show, like the blood people who are providing, should you have surgery, they have a network to where you could have unvaccinated blood sent to you to have on hand and then the Reaction 19 people I'm going to have on the show. Those are the vaccine injured, and they have been, just tragically the gaslighting that no, it's psychosomatic. It's like psychosomatic. I was fine, and now I'm in a wheelchair after the COVID jab. Or what? Hello?
It's that same blame the victim playbook that they do for so many other things.
Yeah. So we've got a couple other folks that I was able to connect with. So that'll be great. Yeah, to keep this conversation going. But Dave, as always, thank you so much for joining us. It was give Amy my best. And it was so great to meet both of you. And
it was great.
Yeah. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Love and Life with Dr. Karin and Pastor Elliott is produced by Tim May and executive producer, Dr. Karin Anderson-Abel. For more information about Love and Life, please go to loveandlifemedia.com.